Hello, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's press briefing on redistricting. We're happy to have you here today. We'll get started in just 1 second as folks are signing on. We have a good amount of folks who have signed on. Thank you again to everyone for joining us. Again, we are gathered here today as a collection of incredible individuals representing organizations in our Voting Rights Coalition, here to condemn the latest North Carolina gerrymandering efforts happening today and tomorrow at the NC General Assembly in an effort to dismantle historic Black Belt District here in North Carolina. I want to kick off our incredible lineup of speakers today. We have a great lineup, so I'm going to keep my opening remarks short, but thank you all so much for being here. We will also, as you can tell, we are recording today's session, so we will share this link as well with folks who are here for the presser, and we'll allow some space for questions as follow-up and share contact information for our speakers. So to kick us off, we have Tyler Day, who's our program manager at Common Cause North Carolina. Tyler, take it away.
Thank you, Julia. So the word frustrating does not even begin to describe how I feel about what is happening this week at the North Carolina General Assembly. State legislators announced plans to manipulate our voting districts yet again, thereby subverting fair elections for North Carolina congressional representatives. But this is not new. It comes off the heels of what they did in 2023 and what our state legislature has been doing for decades. In 2023, the state legislative leaders approved a congressional map which sliced and diced communities all over this state. I'm a resident of the Triad, and for years, the people in the Triad, the cities of Greensboro, High Point, and Winston-Salem, have asked to be kept together as much as possible. I have read through public comments and seen fellow Triad residents speak at public hearings asking for their community to be kept together. Yet, state legislative leaders not only ignored these concerns, they did the opposite of what voters asked. The state passed a plan which split the Triad between 4 congressional districts, placing Winston-Salem in a district with Lincolnton, High Point and Kernersville in a district with Kannapolis and Concord, and splitting Greensboro between 3 congressional districts, with part of the city in a district with Boone and other parts of the city in a district with Fayetteville. Speaking of Fayetteville, many residents of the North Carolina Sandhills have continuously asked for a congressional district to keep their community together. These concerns were also ignored by state legislative leaders. The city of Fayetteville was cracked apart. Voters who live in western Fayetteville, Fort Bragg, and nearby Spring Lake were put in a district with portions of Greensboro. Voters in eastern Fayetteville, including Fayetteville State University, downtown Fayetteville, and nearby Hope Mills, were put in a district that stretches down North Carolina 87 all the way to Wilmington and Southport. Voters in the Charlotte metro region were also cracked apart, with places like Mint Hill, Matthews, and Harrisburg in a district with the Sandhill cities of Lumberton and Laurinburg. Meanwhile, voters in suburban, fast-growing Huntersville and Pineville live in the same district as the Linville Gorge Wilderness in Burke County. All of these horribly drawn districts remain in this new map unveiled by state legislative leaders, and it is a disgrace. The difference is that in this new map, legislative leaders went after the only truly competitive congressional district in North Carolina. Congressional District 1 has historically covered northeastern North Carolina, including much of what's known as the Black Belt. 2020 census data shows that the current Congressional District 1 has a black voting age population of over 40%. The new District 1 dilutes the voting power of Black North Carolinians in Northeast North Carolina by stretching far south into the southern Outer Banks. The black voting age population of the new Congressional District 1 has decreased by over 8%, and this will make it difficult for black voters in this part of the state to elect a candidate of their choice. Representative Don Davis, a Democrat, won Congressional District 1 by less than 2 percentage points in 2024. The new map was drawn specifically to oust Representative Davis and make it easy for a Republican to win. And you don't have to take my word for it. Speaker of the North Carolina House, Destin Hall, and earlier today, Senate Redistricting Co-Chair Ralph Hise said that legislators intended to draw an additional Republican seat. And Senate Leader Phil Berger elaborated, saying that the legislature wanted to safeguard Republican control of Congress. If passed, this map would likely result in 11 Republicans and 3 Democrats representing this purple battleground state. The map has been specifically designed to insulate Republican power so that even if combined across the state, Democrats won more votes for Congress, Republicans will likely always have more seats. It is the legislature's job to make laws which benefit the public, not to defraud the public by rigging elections to favor a political party. If politicians want to increase the number of seats their party has, they can do it the old-fashioned way. Campaign. Make your case to the voters and let the people decide. But it seems that North Carolina's legislative leaders don't have much faith in the voters of this state because they've gone to extraordinary measures to redraw our congressional districts again for the sole purpose of obtaining one more Republican seat in the U.S. House. This is cheating, it is disgraceful, shameful, and it should be illegal. Why is it not illegal? The North Carolina Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court have both allowed it. For far too long, Republicans and Democrats in the North Carolina state legislature and in state legislatures across this country have shown that they can't be trusted to draw fair voting districts. Poll after poll after poll has shown that the voters don't want their votes manipulated by power-hungry politicians. It is time for an independent citizens commission made up of citizens, not politicians, to draw our voting districts. This gerrymandering, and perhaps a better phrase for it, election fraud, election manipulation, election subversion, must be stopped. It is disintegrating the integrity of North Carolina's elections. I also want to note that the Senate Elections Committee met this morning, and there was a chance for people to provide public comment, and not one person who spoke and gave public comment at that meeting spoke in favor of legislative leaders' proposal. So North Carolina Counts Coalition, Common Cause, and others are holding a people's public hearing, and actually multiple public hearings tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, since our state legislature is not providing that. And I'll put a link to those hearings in the chat.
Thank you so much, Tyler. Excuse me, got my throat there. Next up, we have Marquez Thompson, my colleague, the organizing director at Democracy North Carolina.
Thank you, Julia. As mentioned, my name is Marcus Thompson. I'm the organizing director here at Democracy North Carolina. I'm serving as acting executive director while Adrian Kelly is on a much-deserved sabbatical. For more than a decade now, I have been with Democracy North Carolina as a volunteer and also on staff, fighting for a government that is of, by, and for the people. Today, though, I come to you not as an advocate or organizer, but as what should be my most important role in this democracy as a voter, more specifically, a voter from the 1st District that will be personally affected by the proposed changes to our congressional maps. There are many terrible things I can say about this map and this process. I can talk about how it steals power from voters, especially voters of color. How it is really a retaliation against the people of the 1st District for the audacity to select a representative that the General Assembly doesn't approve of. I could talk about how this new map was drawn, not primarily, but explicitly for political gain. The only rationale is that they want more power and they're taking it. They want more seats and they're going to do whatever they can do to make that happen. I could spend a lot of time talking about the role of the North Carolina Supreme Court and how they have given this green light to partisan gerrymander. But as a voter from these targeted districts, I just want to highlight a few aspects of the terrible rationale that really underlie these actions. For instance, our leaders seem to believe that the character of a community just doesn't matter, that they can pack rural communities together with urban communities in the middle of the state with no regard for the people who live there. The only factor they seem to consider about a place is the partisan leanings, and they can just pack and crack accordingly. There seems to be no consideration given to true representation, which is the essence of our democracy. That's what the whole maps are supposed to do. They're supposed to find communities that are together so that they can be fairly represented. But that has not been the goal of this General Assembly. The government should be of the people, meaning that the representative is of the communities they represent and is able to understand their unique problems and opportunities and is willing to fight for those specific people's interests. These maps diminish these communities, my community, and that's wrong. You can also deduce from the actions of these lawmakers that they don't believe that they've been doing a good job. After all, you only have to cheat on a test when you know you're going to fail. You only rig a contest that you don't believe you're good enough to win on your merits. North Carolina is a unique state, one in which any person from any party can succeed. And this has been proven time and time again. Yet, instead of trusting the voters to choose their politicians, these politicians want to choose their voters. That tells you a lot about the disrespect they feel for voters and the failures of their own leadership. But perhaps the worst part of this gerrymander, frankly, any gerrymandered map, is the negative assumptions about the people that lie within that. Whenever one attempts to decide an election before it happens, they have to make assumptions, not just about how people will vote, but also about who's not gonna vote. When it comes to this gerrymander, they must believe that most people won't know or won't care and definitely won't vote. In fact, that's what they're counting on. So this is why we're here today, to make sure that this deed is not done in the dark. We, the people, still have power. And with that power, we have the responsibility to make our voices heard and to make our power felt. One way you can do this is by joining us and submitting your comments online directly to lawmakers or in person tomorrow at the NCGA when the House Redistricting Committee meets at 2 p.m. Or you can contact committee members with our online action at dmnc.co/redistricting. The fact that politicians want to divide us up and weaken our vote is the proof of its power. We can spread the word and use our power together to make sure that this government of, by, and for the people does not perish in North Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we are fortunate enough to be joined by one of our incredible advocates, Tiffany Smith from Northampton County. Tiffany, please take it away.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak. I know it was last minute when I contacted you all, but I think this is an important issue that we, need representation on. I was able to watch the hearings today, and I did not even see my own Senate representative speaking, even though he's a Republican, he would be the one that will stand to benefit the most from this. And the biggest issue that I take with this is the lack of transparency and the lack of hearings. I believe that North Carolinians deserve public hearings. Even though I'm from North Carolina and I stay in the same district, our district and our voting power has been completely diluted. We are not able to have the strength that we have in the Black community. And it's making sure that our Senate representative, who wasn't even included in our hearings as a Republican, is automatically going to be basically the next congressional representative, even though we might not, want to vote for him. So me as an independent, I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I just take issue with the lack of transparency and the lack of public hearings and scheduling the hearings when I would have wanted to be there, but I was at work. It's like they are trying to sham this or jam this down our throat with a sham process. And I think we deserve better than that. And I would have liked for someone to have spoken on our behalf, because the person who drew the maps is from Western North Carolina. And I myself have had the benefit of traveling to all 100 counties and doing work in all 100 counties. And I can unequivocally state that he drawing these maps does not adequately represent us in the East. We are very different. The population is very different. We are Democratic leaning and they are Republican leaning. And so we are not adequately represented. I would have, liked for us to have had hearings before they drew the maps and included someone, the representatives from the East, to be included in that process. And so that's where I thank you for allowing me to share my concerns and to speak on behalf of my community, from the House district that was the most Democratic leaning, that is now going to be Republican leaning, and allowing us to have a voice in the matter, even though we were not able to have a voice in Raleigh, that you guys have presented us with this opportunity. And I do see that some of my fellow community members are on the call. And so I'm glad that you are allowing us to do this. But I do believe that we need to have fair voting maps that respect and uphold the rights of Black and Brown people across the state, and that this is creating a modern day barrier to representation. This is, like you said, a new form of poll tax and of literacy tests that they're giving us, and they're not even giving us a chance to prepare for it. At least let us, study for it, and we just, instead of ramming it down our throats in less than a week. So I do want to speak on, I'm glad that I got to speak on that, and I thank you for your time.
Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us and for taking time out of your busy day. It really is an incredible honor and privilege, I think, for all of us to hear directly from voters who are going to be affected by this. So thank you again for joining. Next up, we have Shruti Parikh, Director of Education and Political Engagement with North Carolina Asian Americans Together.
Thank you, Julia. As Julia said, my name is Shruti Parikh. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Director of Education and Political Engagement at North Carolina Asian Americans Together. First of all, thank you for giving us the space to talk and to come together and show our disappointment at the process that's unfolding before us. I just want to say that it's shameful that partisan power brokers are once again using backroom deals to rig our elections and silence voters, the very people they're meant to serve. North Carolinians deserve leadership that works for us, not politicians who twist the rules to protect their own power. Instead of tackling issues that actually affect people's lives, they're taking the coward's way out and putting a thumb on the scale. This is not the direction our state should be headed. For far too long, gerrymandering has robbed Black, Brown, and Asian American communities of fair representation and a real voice in our democracy. Redistricting is supposed to happen once every 10 years through an open and transparent process that centers community voices, not in secret meetings designed to cement partisan control. Elected officials shouldn't be picking their voters. Voters should be picking their representatives. It's deeply disappointing to see our legislature, once again, turn its back on fairness, transparency, and the people of this state. This isn't governance, it's self-preservation. Our right to vote, our right to fair representation, our right to be heard, all of it, it's based on being treated as collateral and a power grab that weakens our democracy and erases the voices of communities of color. North Carolinians are asking for affordable health care, a lower cost of living, fully funded public schools. Instead, lawmakers are wasting time and taxpayer dollars undermining our very communities. When maps divide our neighborhoods, they divide our power. They drown out the voices of Asian Americans, Black and Brown North Carolinians, young voters, and working families across the state. Voters whose growing strength should be shaping the future of the state, not silenced by partisan manipulation. And that's not what North Carolina stands for. North Carolina Asian Americans Together joins organizations across the state and nation in demanding fair, transparent redistricting. protection of minority voting power under the Voting Rights Act, and a community-led, cross-racial process that values every voice. We call on our elected officials to choose integrity over partisanship. We call on our leaders to reject these maps. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shruti. Next up, we'll have Liz Barber, Policy Director with the ACLU of North Carolina.
Good afternoon. I'm Liz Barber. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Policy Director at the ACLU of North Carolina, and I am joining you all from the roof of the General Assembly building. And I sat just outside of the Senate gallery earlier today thinking about what to say on this call, and a student group came through, and you all might have seen, I think it was a different student group come through earlier during this call. And they're learning about government, they're learning about democracy. And while I just overheard, bits and pieces of what their teachers were telling them, they're learning about the core of democracy. They're learning about voting. They're learning about representation. They're learning about elected leaders and who their elected leaders are, and that being an elected leader is about doing what is right by all of your constituents, not just the ones who think like them. And that is far from what we're actually seeing happening in this building today and this week. Today, we see an unapologetic power grab, a gerrymander to further raise the voices of people who agree with the party in power while silencing others. When you rig a system to favor yourself and silence the votes of people who think differently than you erode the right to vote and you diminish our democracy. If this new map passes, or I should say when this new map passes, it makes it harder for voters like you to hold your representatives accountable, especially as policies like federal Medicaid cuts hurt so many North Carolinians. North Carolina maps have been redrawn over and over, not because it is a normal thing to happen, but because federal courts have repeatedly found earlier versions of maps to violate constitutional protections against partisan and racial gerrymandering. This latest push to gerrymander is right on the heels of a federal court rejecting Jefferson Griffin's baseless challenge to Judge Allison Riggs' fair election to the North Carolina Supreme Court just last year. It was a major win for voters. This week, I urge the North Carolina General Assembly not to respond to a call from Washington, but rather to uphold the foundational democratic principles of voting and fair representation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz, and thanks for being there today at the General Assembly. We appreciate it. Next up, we have Hassani Mitchell, a Democracy and Economy Coordinator with the North Carolina Black Alliance.
Thanks so much. And first of all, I echo the sentiments of all my colleagues that have spoken before me. I just want to really level set and just say that when redistricting becomes explicitly tied to a specific party, gaining advantage, rather than fair representation, it really raises the question about whose interests are being prioritized. And I think we know it's no secret that the most pressing issue that this legislature should be prioritizing is addressing and passing an equitable budget. However, the legislature did find the time to create gerrymander maps with no public input. This was not ordered, it was not requested. And quite frankly, at the time that we're in now, it's really not necessary. It's also important to note that the focus of all the contention is Congressional District 1. And so Congressional District 1, if you do not know, it contains many of the historically Black majority or heavily Black populated counties in eastern and northeastern North Carolina. And really, it's a historic place that has significance. It's home to some of the oldest Black communities really in the United States. And it has a century-long, decade-long legacy of political organizing. And Congressional District 1, it's really important to note that it has not elected a Republican since 1883. And so this is the setup. And so African Americans have really represented this district heavily for decades. And so here's what we really got to realize. These new congressional maps, they do nothing for the 300,000 plus North Carolinians who are going to lose their health care coverage, including those citizens who live in Congressional District 1. These new congressional maps, they do nothing for the voters in North Carolina, including the voters in Congressional District 1 who need affordable housing. These new maps, they do nothing for lowering food costs for the citizens in Congressional District 1. These new maps, they do nothing for the negative impacts of the environmental impacts of the citizens that live in Congressional District 1. These new maps, they do nothing for the voters in North Carolina and the citizens in Congressional District 1 who really need a livable wage. These new maps, they do nothing for the citizens in Congressional District 1 who need jobs, who need workforce development. And so this is really a deliberate effort, really taking from other playbooks across the state to really diminish the voting power of Blacks in North Carolina. And it's really an effort to really turn what's already a lopsided congressional map into a landslide. I think it's already been stated, a landslide for Republicans who are looking to control 80% of the state's congressional delegation. And so when legislators prioritize redistricting over the real issues that North Carolinians talk about at the dinner table, all voters, regardless of your party affiliation, all voters lose representation on the important issues that matter the most. And so if you're tired of seeing redistricting prioritized over those issues that you talk about at the dinner table, you need to let your elected officials know. You can submit your public comment on the proposed maps through the General Assembly's portal, but you need to get out and vote. You need to mobilize. You need to let your elected officials know that this is really unprecedented and it's unnecessary. And quite frankly, we've got to do better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Melissa Price-Crom, Executive Director of North Carolina for the People.
Thank you, Julia. Now, for decades, North Carolina voters have faced obstacles to fair participation, ranging from restrictive voting laws to reduced polling places to traditional redistricting and gerrymandering district maps that split communities and weaken representation. Now, these tactics are about narrowing the electorate, and it make it harder for some North Carolinians, especially communities of color, young voters, and working families to have their voices fully heard. Today, the challenge has evolved. Instead of nibbling away at the margins of participation, today's strategies threaten democracy outright. These extreme gerrymandering wars, now let's remind you, they were started by Trump calling Texas to find him votes. Sound familiar? They were designed to overturn the will of the people and create pathways for our election boards and our courts to throw out ballots after they've been cast, as we saw with the Griffin Challenge. Now, this moment isn't just about a partisan advantage, as we heard legislative leaders say it was today. It is about whether our democratic systems will remain accountable to we, the people. Now, normally, districts are redrawn in only two situations. After the census to rebalance populations and uphold the 14th Amendment of one person, one vote, or two, when there's a court order that challenges them to fix legal violations. What's happening now is neither. Legislative leaders have openly admitted that this redraw isn't about population balance or a court order. It's about removing voters in North Carolina's Black Belt to engineer a partisan advantage. That's what they said today. This is a retaliation against voters for how they voted, a deliberate effort to silence communities of color, to create a predetermined outcome in Congress. Now, North Carolina's congressional maps have changed 4 times in the last 5 years. This is chaos. If this pattern continues, North Carolinians will live under new maps after every election cycle, punished again and again for exercising their right to vote. These frequent redraws undermine the principle that voters should choose their representatives, not the other way around. Now, moreover, at a time when working families are struggling with rising costs, there is a severe teacher shortage in our state. My own daughter doesn't have a teacher right now. Healthcare remains completely out of reach for far too many, and a lack of adequately funded public services if you've ever been to the DMV lately. Ongoing battles over political maps simply divert attention and resources away from the issues that affect most people's daily lives. Now, Every time maps are drawn for political gain, it reduces accountability and limits real choices at the ballot box. A healthy democracy depends on fair representation and stable rules. That's why reform is essential. North Carolina needs an independent redistricting process that removes these conflicts of interest and builds public trust. We also advocate proportional representation as a long way to ensure that every vote counts and every voice is heard. Bottom line, fair maps should never depend on which party or official holds power. They should reflect the will of the people of North Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And next up, we have Kat Robles, Senior Voting Rights Counsel and Litigation Manager with Forward Justice.
Hey everyone, everyone's made so many amazing points, and I just want to talk a little bit about the argument that this isn't racial, it's just partisan, because those two things are the same. And both nationally, but also particularly in North Carolina, we have racial polarization in our voting. The disparities between white voters and Black voters are larger than the disparities for any other demographic comparisons, income, education, or sex. So please don't buy into it when someone says that this isn't about race, it's about party, because those two things are intertwined. And particularly when we were talking about CD1, which is a historically Black district with a Black representative, this is an attack on Black North Carolinians in particular. And I do want to talk a little bit about how we got here. As others have said, we're supposed to be only doing this every 10 years. There were new districts drawn in 2020. They were challenged in court, and ultimately the court ruled that they were gerrymandered, and that led to a much fairer set of maps, and it led to a 7-7 split between the two parties in the 2022 midterm elections. So how did we get from there to here? It is because of our courts. As many of you all know who live in North Carolina, our courts flipped as a result of the November 2022 election. They decided to rehear a case about redistricting and to rule that they did not have any authority to look at partisan gerrymandering, which brought us to our 10-4 maps that we have today. Obviously, like we've said on this call, the push now is to take it from 10-4 partisan split in our congressional seats to 11-3. This would not in any way, shape, or form match up with who the voters are. We see in our statewide elections that people are pretty evenly split. We've had a couple statewide elections come down to just a few hundred votes. This just simply doesn't reflect what anyone wants or what anyone is looking for. And I also want to point out that I don't think anyone who's behind this has made a single comment that they feel like this is in favor of the voters or something the voters want or need. So this is certainly going to have a big impact on marginalized community. They're seeking to eliminate Don Davis's seat, reducing the racial diversity of the legislative body, undermining the symbolic importance of his representation. And we just want to stand up and name this as an attack on Black voters, and that we will not be silent in the midst of yet another gerrymander that does not reflect the will of the voters in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you so much, Kat. And last but certainly not least, we have Ashley Mitchell, who is a staff attorney with Forward Justice.
Sorry, y'all, struggling coming off of mute. But hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Mitchell. I am one of the voting rights attorneys at Forward Justice, but I'm also a resident of District 1. Don Davis is the representative that my district elected to represent us. How did we do that? We did it through people power. People power is the power that we, the people, have to instill change. It's the people power that pisses off our legislature, which is why we see so much pushback against the voters, not just in District 1, but across our state. There has been various tactics of voter suppression over the last 10 plus years. More than that, the recent requirement of voter ID, attacks to shorten early voting, attacks to restrict who can do voter registration, attacks on absentee ballots, and now our most recent, the gerrymandering attack on Congressional District 1 voters. Most likely, this is not the last attempt that we're going to see to silence voters across the state, especially Black voters across our state. But are we going to just sit back? The answer is no. We are not going to just sit back. We are going to fight back. How do we do that? We do that by giving them more people power. We do that by informing our peers on what's happening, educating our people, our folks, what is going on. A lot of folks don't even know. Out here in District 1, most of us don't even get North Carolina news. We get Virginia-based news. So sometimes we're not informed. So make sure you are informing your peers, participating in the public comments that was mentioned on this call by my peers, contacting your representatives. These folks are not untouchable. These are human beings that you can contact. You can call them, email them, contact your representatives. Let them know that this is not the things that we want happening in our state towards our democracy. Showing up at protests and using your voice on social media, reaching the masses, telling them this is not how we want our democracy to be. Most importantly, we are going to show up at the polls. We are going to show that you cannot sway us. You cannot deter us from exercising our right to vote. Yeah, things might be a little funky, but they are not going to deter us. So again, we are not going to sit back. We are going to fight back in 2026 and show up at the midterm elections. We are going to show that the people truly do have the power to elect our representatives and leaders, whether they like it or not. That's all I got. I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And thank you so much to all of our incredible speakers who joined us today, as well as those in our community, from journalists to fellow advocates to some of our wonderful staff members across our organizations who joined us as well. I put this in the chat a moment ago, but if folks have any questions for our speakers, feel free to use that function or to put something in the chat while we have a few minutes. And we will also, again, as I named before the call, we will share out a link to the recording. It is actually going live on YouTube right now, so we will share that link as soon as this is over. And we, as folks have mentioned, we also have the House Redistricting Committee is meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Public comment will be available. There's still the opportunity to make public comment online. I see we have a question in the chat. Any plans for a lawsuit from NC Newsline from Ahmed? Let any of the attorneys or folks on this call if there are any responses to that.
All I can say is I expect that lawsuits are the next step.
Seems likely, unfortunately. Well, again, if folks have any follow-up questions, we will reach out with the recording as well as contact information for our speakers. And just wanted to lift up again that we will have the People's Hearing happening this week, as hosted by, the link is here, I'll paste this again, happening tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday. As I mentioned before, again, opportunity for public comment is still happening online as well as in person tomorrow afternoon at the North Carolina General Assembly with the House Redistricting Committee. And we also will be continuing to circulate our action alert at demnc.co/redistricting. So thank you again so much to all of our speakers for joining us and to everyone who joined for the call. And if we don't have any further questions, we can wrap today. Thank you all. Enjoy your day.